What up, nerds? Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative. My name is Leslie Smith, and today on the channel I have my stack here of all of the things that I read during the month of February. I'm gonna run through it real quick, just recap what I read, what I rated it, and attempt to give you a short book description of each, why I liked it, or if I didn't like it. I want to tell you that too, just to help get those expectations hopefully in the right place and help you make an informed decision about, is this a book I'm going to enjoy? And if you're not quite sure, maybe you'll hold off purchasing it and get it through your library to test out the waters before adding it to your own personal library. Let's just jump right in. I go in order of what I started out the month reading and what I ended the month reading. So the first book that I read in February and just absolutely loved is Credible Threats by Daniel Meyer. This is the first book in the Sam Adams series. And who is Sam Adams? Well, he's a 16-year-old wizard who's only had his magic for about I guess that's not exactly true. He only learned about his magic 3 years ago and started trying to learn how to use it. So he's very new at this. And what does that mean as a teenager? As a young person, you're more likely to take risk and write checks with your mouth that your tail can't cash, or in this case, your magic can't cash. Just love him to death. He's a very endearing character. This is urban fantasy. If you're a fan of Dresden, I think you'll love this. I gave this one 4 stars, and before I even finished reading it, I'd already purchased the second book in the series. So February was immediately off to a great start. That was kept going by The Curse of the Mistwraith, which is the first book in an epic fantasy series, The Wars of Light and Shadow, which that is a completed series, by the way. I know there's a lot of folks out there that like to wait and start a series once it's finished. So this one's finished, you're good to go. So Janie Wirtz, this was the first big book of hers that I read. I read The Gallant December. Gosh, December is already 2 months away. Whew. Time is flying. I really enjoyed The Gallant. It's a prequel novella. I would say read at least The Curse of the Mistwraith first before reading that novella, or maybe even read a couple books. I don't know. Maybe we'll come back and revisit that because I am about to read the second book in this series. I was part of an all-star booktuber discussion of this book. I'm going to link that live stream down in the description box below. It happened on John's channel, Talking Story. The next one for book 2 is going to be on BellTube. That's Brian Bell. I'll have that link down there as well, just in case you're a fan of the series. But if you're someone who is new to the series, you've been wanting to try it out, you want to have some other people to follow along with, this is a great time to jump on board. And this is the type of series that's really fun to have discussions about because there is so much to talk about. Janie Wirtz is someone I would describe as having a very meaningful writing style. There is no word wasted, which is fantastic because everything feels like it has value. Everything adds to the story. It's not fluff. It's just beautifully written, and there's a lot to take in. This is the type of series that if you are a serial rereader like I am, is going to bring you joy for years to come. With every reading, you're going to discover something new to love, something that you missed the first time. This is one of those that is like a 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. It's a big time investment, but the end result is going to be worth it. So absolutely loved it. This is a fantasy series that, while it has the title that gives you the idea it's the battle between good and evil, the Wars of Light and Shadow, it's not really. It's more along the lines of showing you, digging into why you just can't take everything at face value. I love discussing this with the group and seeing who was each person's favorite character and why, what stood out to, like, this is just one of those books that's just fun all around to read and discuss. I just have a feeling that this is going to end up being one of my top 5 favorite fantasy series of all time, just as I continue on. At this point in the month, I was on the hype train. The good times were just rolling, and they kept rolling right along with the newest release by Zora Neale Hurston, The Life of Herod the Great. Now, let me preface this because I've run into this before with folks in the past, and I don't think people remember that sometimes when they pick up a book, even though it is about a real life person, you gotta look for that second word: historical fiction, Christian fiction. Some folks seem to have an opinion that if it has to do with religion, even though it says historical fiction or Christian fiction, that the author is not supposed to infer dialogue. They're not supposed to create things between these biblical characters to give you more context and culture. I love that stuff. It helps me understand better why these characters did what they did, because it was a completely different time. I absolutely adored this. Now, Zora Neale Hurston spent 14 years researching and studying the life of Herod the Great. She was also, in addition to being a phenomenal author, an anthropologist. So I feel like things that she was inferring, the fictional portions of this book, I feel like it was based on some very good skills that she had honed by being an anthropologist. Our boy Herod was vilified in the Bible. Some of the things he did, pastors have been using it for years to teach their flocks, hey, this is what Herod did and look what happened. What Zora did, she wasn't happy with just being told this. She wanted to know more about it, and that's what led to her researching his life so much. She wanted people to be aware there was more to him than just what the Bible said about him. In the author's own words, when she was asked, why would you research a life of Herod the Great? Quote, for many valid reasons, the first being that the West, whose every nation professes Christianity, should be better acquainted with the historical Herod instead of the deliberately folklore Herod. Outside of Herod's connection with Christianity, rarely has an individual appeared who gleamed and glittered from so many facets. He has impressed himself upon the pages of history as an athlete, a soldier of the first class, an equally able administrator, a statesman, a devotee of higher learning, as a great and tragic lover, and as a friend as famous as Damon and Pythian. Just a phenomenally good time. But if you are someone that you think anything to do with Christianity is not allowed to have fiction wrapped in and around it, then just avoid it altogether and stay away from Christian fiction as well. So far, if you're keeping score, I've had 3 4-star reads to start out the month of February. Next was my very first 5-star of the month. No surprise that it's by a favorite author, Stephen Graham Jones. I was incredibly lucky to have been approved for an ARC for this one. It comes out March 18th from my friends over at Saga Press. This is Stephen Graham Jones's first vampire novel. I did a full non-spoiler video review. I'll have that linked for you to go check out. But the very short premise of it takes place in the American West during the year of 1912 in the Montana area around Yellowstone. And it's a nested narrative. A diary has been uncovered in the wall of a church that belonged to a Lutheran priest. And within its pages, he transcribed the confession, the story of a Blackfeet Indian named Goodstab, who traveled around that area seeking justice. That all started with the massacre of 217 Blackfeet. That is so bare bones. There is so much more. I absolutely adored this book, and it was my first 5-star of the month. And right on its heels came my next 5-star read of the month in a completely different vein. I'm talking Scythe and Sparrow by Bren Weaver. This is the 3rd book in the Ruinous Love trilogy. I lovingly call this serial killer smut. It is a romance story. Now, the first 2 books in this trilogy had, I would say, more emphasis on the serial killer aspect than the love story. But this one, I think the serial killer part was dialed back and more focus was put on the love story. So I like that we broke from the formula of the first two books, gave us something new and different. It was also just a really great ending for this trilogy. I wasn't ready to say goodbye to this family of three brothers and the people that they've met and picked up and added to their family along the way. I wasn't ready, but it was done the right way. And there was an exciting thing at the end. But yeah, I am a huge fan now of Brynn Weaver. I'm going to read everything she writes, even though smut's not my genre of choice. In fact, whenever I've talked about, somebody's asked me for a review, I'm like, sure, I like anything. I'll read anything, but I don't like smut or, what do I call it? Something that starts with an E. Erotic. I don't read erotica stuff. But I will sure as hell read it if it's written like that. At this point, I had historical fiction, historical horror, smut. It was time to get back around to some fantasy, and I did that by reading Dreaming the Eagle by Amanda Scott. This was my patron pick for the month of January. Yeah, I was a little late getting into it, but it was my patron pick by Heidi. This is a Celtic-inspired fantasy that was just wonderful. I would say historical fantasy, actually, because the location that this took place in, and it also had some dealings with Rome. It's the smaller tribes, and of course what Rome is trying to do is colonize and take over. Well, colonize isn't right, because really they just wanted to wipe out these smaller tribes who are warring with each other just as much as they are with Rome. So I'm curious to see, as the series continues, are these tribes going to be able to come together and become allies in order to fight off Rome? Curious. I love that the people, the tribes, put so much value. They think that their gods are in horses, and they put so much value on pups, or hounds is what they call them in the series. I love getting to know these characters of this one particular tribe. Well, there's actually a couple. And the two main characters are brother and sister, Breaka and Ban. Breaka wants to be a dreamer. She wants to be a dreamer so bad, but it actually turns out that she's a warrior. Her little brother Ban, he wants to be the warrior, and instead he has the potential to become that tribe's greatest dreamer. I love the series. It is so tragic. It's going to put you through the ringer emotionally. So if you need something that's just going to get you emotionally invested, this is a great pick. Heidi also recommended that I get the audiobook that is narrated by Josephine Bailey, who did an outstanding job with its narration. Whenever I read something that takes place in a foreign land, to me, I like it to have a narrator that is native, or at least good enough to fake it, that I think they're from that country. With this being a Celtic story, I'm looking for that accent Josephine Bailey delivered. I had a really good time with that fantasy book. I wanted to stay in that fantasy vein, so I switched gears a little bit, picked up a portal fantasy. I read the second book in the Locke Institute trilogy by A.R. Witham. It's called The Trial of Rooker Flynn. That 5-star came out of nowhere. The audiobook is everything. Andy, the author, reached out and said, hey, this book's going to be on Audible soon. As soon as it is, I would love to send you a code for the audiobook. I was like, you know what? That'd be great. I have some space for an audiobook. I would love to listen to this because Andy is just such a great narrator. In addition to being, he's like the total package. He can write, he can narrate, he can sing. One of the little characters in this book, his name is Pilly Pilgrim. He is a bard. You gotta read that first book to understand Billy and why it was such a beautiful thing for him to sing in this book. And I'm one of those people that if I read a book and it has a song in it, I skip it. I'm not musically inclined at all. So when I read a book, I'm one of those people, it plays out like a movie in my mind. I see it in pictures. When I get to a song, my brain cannot translate that well, so I just skip it. And most of the time, it's just kind of there. I feel like it's nothing that's adding to or taking away from the story. So, but the songs in this one, oh my gosh, so good. So it's a continuation of book 1, which I have a video review, non-spoiler. I'll have it linked, check it out. And it got darker. It got more interesting. It got more involved. There was some insane character development of the character of Rooker Flynn that I wasn't expecting. I just was completely unprepared for what happened, what I learned, and what was explored. Just getting to learn the nuances of this character. He is so complex. At face value, especially when you meet him in the standalone, The Legend of Blackjack, that also takes place in the same world, same characters. Well, most of the same characters. Well, some of the same characters. You just see him and you're like, this guy's a jackass. He's a pirate. He's a brigand. He's just out for himself. You love him to death, but you wouldn't go to sleep around him for fear he would steal the silver fillings out of your mouth kind of guy. But this one, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to see what's going to happen in that third book. I'm pretty sure I saw on my subscription feed that Andy is doing live streams on his YouTube channel while he is recording the audiobook for book 3. So it's written. I believe it must be ready to go. Going to be coming out soon. Oh gosh, y'all, do yourself a favor. You want to get on board with this series? The audiobooks are the way to go. That is a guaranteed 5-star experience for you. If you like audiobooks. If you don't, it's still a great series. You're still going to enjoy it. I read the first book. I read the ARC digitally. Still fantastic. Still loved it. But that audiobook, man, it's just absolutely magnificent. So that brings me to the last book that I read during the month of February. I ended it with another banger. This is a new to me author. It's called Don't Tell Me How to Die by Marshall Karp, out March the 4th. So by the time this video goes up, you can get you a copy of this book. I would recommend the audiobook if you're an audiobook lover because it is narrated by January LaVoy. So this book, I picked it up. It's supposed to be a domestic thriller. Love those. What appealed to me about this book is our main character, Maggie. She's 43. She's just gotten the news that she has the same rare blood disease that killed her mother when she was 43. Coincidentally, Maggie herself has just turned 43. So this immediately takes her back to the last few days she had with her mother and what happened in the aftermath. Because her mother was so young, she warned her teenage daughters that, look, your dad's attractive, he's successful, the women are going to be coming after him. And they did, and there was a horrible experience there. And Maggie was determined she was not going to let that happen to her husband and her kids. She was going to find her replacement because this disease apparently worked quickly. She knew she only had months to live. So I forgot that this was a thriller here for a minute. I'm just reading about this woman dealing with a terminal illness. Oh, and then all of a sudden, Marshall Karp, it's like we turn a page and he's like, hey, this is a domestic thriller. Remember, it's time to do some twists and turns. Oh my Lord, we jackknifed, y'all. We jackknifed. It was incredible. I loved it. It was unexpected. It was very fast paced, easy to read. Short chapters, which I don't know what it is about short chapters, but I read through them so fast. Could be it was just written so well. It was interesting. There was so much going on. Just loved it. So I would absolutely recommend picking that one up. And again, you audiobook lovers, don't sleep on that one because January LaVoy, she is S tier when it comes to audiobook narrators. So speaking of S tier audiobook narrators, it's time to crown audiobook of the month and favorite book of the month. I did forget to mention that Herod the Great was an immersion read. I checked out the audiobook from my library so I could combine the two. The narrator for this one is Blair Underwood. This is my first time listening to a book with his narration, and he wins. He wins this month for favorite audiobook narrator. Even though I love Andy, but I've listened to Andy before. I already knew Andy was a 5-star audiobook narrator, but Blair Underwood is joining the ranks for this month. But book of the month, oh my goodness, what is my favorite book of the month? It's always so hard to pick just one because I read in so many different genres. Like if I could pick one horror, one smut, one thriller, and one fantasy, that would be easy. Oh man, this is so hard. You know what? I'm gonna give it to Stephen Graham Jones and the Buffalo Hunter. This was the first time that he tackled a vampire story, and in my opinion, he excelled. He stayed true to the lore and legend of Dracula, but adding its own unique twist and spin to fit it into the time and culture of the Blackfeet that we know as Good Stab in this one. And I just loved it. There's so much I would love to say about this one, but I just can't because it would spoil it, and I'm not gonna do that. At any rate, y'all, that's gonna wrap it up for me in the month of February. Hope I talked about something today that you're gonna try yourselves. You'll have to let me know if you do. Take care, and I will catch you in the next one. This channel would not be what it is today without its patrons, especially those of my top tier: Ev, Sharon, Kate, Andrew, Amanda, Ann, Tara, Star, Gail, John, Chad, Heidi, and Wilbur.